And we're going to start off with 3-minute candidate introductions. And Charles started the first time last time, so we're going to allow Lori to go first today. Lori, you have 3 minutes to make your opening statement.
Hi, my name is Lori Brown. I'm running for Ventura City Council District 6, which I like to say is a South Side gateway to the city. My platform issues for District 6 is revitalizing the Johnson Corridor, getting sidewalks in Montalvo, and Aldi's on the east side. But it doesn't have to be an Aldi's. It could be any type of grocery store, but anything but another convenience store or a gas station. We don't want that. And we have to do that in collaboration with the other districts on the east side. I also like to say that regionally the issues are obviously water, but water in concert with economic development and housing and other issues related to economic development. Business, that means making sure that we have good business incentives and that we streamline our process for our business owners. And the last thing I think is really important to say is that whatever council members elected this time around in this cycle, they will be responsible for laying out the city law of the land. That's what I say jokingly, but on the serious side, for the next 20 years. So you really need to make sure you get a council member who understands city budgeting, who has a background in city management and or public budgeting, and understands how city services are funded. I am that candidate. Excuse me, I'm native, I'm qualified, and I'm ready to serve this district and the city at large. Because whether or not we serve the district, we also serve the city, and we'll be voting on things that affect the entire city. I'm native, meaning I was born and raised. I was born at Community Memorial Hospital. I'm educated by all local schools: Portola, Anacapa, Buena, Ventura College, California Lutheran University. I have a master's in public policy and administration. And I like to say that the city of Ventura is like a Victorian house. It's old, it's beautiful, it needs some renovation, and the plumbing needs to be fixed, right? And so I'm here to say that City of Ventura is beautiful, and I, as your council member, want to help you make it gorgeous, okay? In addition to that, I'm a mother. I worked as a certified substitute teacher last year for the Ventura Unified School District. And you want a candidate who has a heart for your children, because the future of the children for the city of Ventura is what's important. We have seniors that are being priced out and on a fixed income out of their homes. You have college students who come home and they can't settle here where they grew up. They have to move to a whole nother state because they can't find a job and a place to live. And you have working families who can't get a good start here. And so I want to help change that narrative for the city of Ventura, and in the process, invite tourism, invite business, but at the same time, maintain the integrity of our natural resources and balance that with the beauty. So in other words, we're not gonna, I understand in Montalvo there was a concern about the apartment building that was built recently. So that's all I have to say for now. I have more to say later. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, you have 3 minutes.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Montalvo Community Council and you folks in the audience for coming out and putting this forum on and participating. It's very important that we all in the community, especially now that it is districts, really familiarize ourselves with the candidates that are running, what they stand for, what the issues are that are important to them, and also how they plan on working with the other council members to make sure that the things that are important, not only to us here, but throughout the city, are accomplished. And we've got plenty of work to do, so I really want to again, thank you for coming, and I want you to understand that I bring 25 years of experience working with other community leaders and elected officials to our city council. I will provide visionary leadership committed to responsible government, economic vitality, and a clean, safe neighborhood. I will work with my fellow council members to develop more opportunities for Ventura's residents and future generations to live here and prosper. And once elected, my first goal is to find out exactly where our city stands financially so that we can plan and prioritize accordingly. And we also need to develop things these days on a regional level. There's no way we as a city of Ventura could build ourselves out of or build enough for bringing in quality businesses to the community. But I've worked with other city officials in Oxnard, Santa Paula, Fillmore, that I have a working relationship with, that we can plan for housing creation. We need to look at what our housing stocks are now, what needs to be built, so that we don't miss out on more opportunities either of losing companies that are already here because we don't have housing, or being able to invite companies into the area to create more jobs for our community. We also need to work regionally on water issues. For far too long, everybody's been, very territorial about this. We can share the cost, for instance, even of building out the connection with the California State Water by working with other cities. We should be partnering with everybody that we can to make sure that we get the best deal, best quality, best for our ratepayers and our citizens. And lastly, and we've already got something that we really have been working on for a while. I've been working with the Continuum of Care, which is a county agency that is related to HUD funding. But I was on the Housing and Services Committee, where we really looked at all the options and what's actually out there for dealing with the homeless. And again, this is a regional issue, and it's a good opportunity for all of us, especially in West Ventura County, to work together to try to find real solutions to the problem. We can't just have a year-round shelter. We need to have some transitional housing for those people to move out of, because once they've gotten their services and gotten their jobs, they need to have somewhere else to go, or it's all a waste of our time and their money, or our money and their time. So anyways, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, our second question goes to Charlie. As you campaign, these questions go for both of you, but Charlie, you start first. As you campaign, what issues are on the minds of District 6 voters in particular?
Well, first of all, when I went out originally to get my nomination papers, I'd say to them, what 3 things do you think we need to do in our community that would make things better? And really, most people were left kind of scratching their head. So then after we talked a bit about it, the idea is that we live in an area where it's a bedroom community. Most people are hardworking, blue-collar people, and when they have some time and some extra money, they like to, play with their RV or boat or whatever, and, their toys, and take a couple weeks vacation. And so, really, as long as the city's taking care of our what it's supposed to be, and we feel like we're getting our money's worth for, streets and water and things like that, I think that most people really just kind of want to be left alone and want to, live their lives. And I know one of the things that to me is important, and that I see people from our area going out and doing, is, we've got kids that are playing youth sports and involved in a lot of other community things through their churches and other things. And I think that I got one of those great moments today. I got to go out and watch my granddaughter play, which I've done the whole AYSO season, but she finally scored her first goal, and needless to say, it was exciting and for all of us, and she was skipping all over the place. So anyways, we really are a community. I would like to see us become a little bit tighter by doing some community pride work. I know that, for instance, in Oxnard, they clean up their parks, or once a month they get together and pick a spot, or their alleys. And I think we've got plenty of parkways and gateways to our community that we could do some volunteer work at and spruce those areas up. As the campaign has evolved, it's become more and more apparent, of course, during this time, Toys R Us closed all their stores and went into bankruptcy. So what was already a blighted area in Johnson and problems with traffic, as I would bring those up as I was walking around, that seemed to be something that, oh yeah, we need to work on that. And I remind them that we have 50,000 people that live in this East End, that if we ever had to evacuate, that's basically the only way out of town. And so we really need to work on that. And I would say that that's one of the things that I'm hearing a little more and more about. People also will talk a bit more about homelessness than they have in the past, but the burning issue, I think out in districts 4 and 5, on Wells, they have more burning issues than what I'm hearing from my neighborhood walks.
Okay, thank you, Lori. As you campaign, what issues are on the minds of District 6 voters in particular?
So there's a lot. So when you talk about Montalvo, they're concerned about the water rates increasing, and right before the annexation and right after. And then they're concerned about the apartment building that was recently built right behind the R1 residential homes. They're concerned about the traffic it's going to have, and that there's only one way in and one way out. They're concerned about where the cars are going to park once it's full. They're concerned about the kids that go to Montalvo Elementary School that walk across the street back and forth. Is it going to increase the instance of accidents and maybe a child being killed? God forbid. But they're concerned about the city making a land grab. And let me put a little plug. I tell everybody, vote no on Proposition 6 so that we can get the sidewalks, because that project is funded by those funds that Prop 6 would cut in the event that Prop 6 passed. So then we wouldn't get those sidewalks, at least not right away. So when I walked closer up towards the bird track at the top of Sunridge, Ralston area, a lot of them did express that they seemed comfortable and happy for the most part, but there's still some things. So the trees that were planted way back in the late 60s, early 70s are the same trees. And their roots are growing down and if there's a leak in one of the pipes, the roots automatically go over to the pipe. And then a couple of the homeowners, at least 3 of them, said they had to pay up to $10,000 or $12,000 that the city wasn't, I guess, said it wasn't their responsibility to pay for it, and they had to pay to get that fixed from their house all the way out to the street. So that's another issue. I had a couple of people say I had one person say Johnson Drive is dead. What are we going to do about it? I had another resident say, well, why didn't they do a traffic study? That seems to be on a lot of people's minds. And then as I walk closer around the Kimball Park, I also had seniors that say we're concerned that there's not enough rent control, or that the rent is going up at a high rate really quickly, and we're going to be priced out really quickly. And we reached out to council members several times, and all our cries are falling on deaf ears. And I had a lady come to me in tears, expressing those concerns to me. In addition to that, the other concern was what more can be done with Kimball Park. Like, how can we service seniors better? And I did find out recently that the city of Ventura is written into the master plan of the Kimball Park for it to have a senior center. But I want to take it one step further and make it like a community resource center that includes a senior center and possibly a pop-up library that offers technology services, because it can generate revenues. You can have annual events there. I mean, Oxnard shouldn't be the only place that has a performing arts center. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, this question is for both of you, and it will have a 2-minute time limit this time. Then Lori, you'll start. If you're elected to the council, what will be your top priority?
So my top priority would be, so if you're talking about regionally, because it's kind of tiered, I want to find out a little bit more about the water issue. So I know a lot about the fact that we have the Mound Basin on the east side and the Casitas River on the west side, and the east side doesn't have access to the west side water, and there's been lawsuits, and we've already kind of exhausted our relationships with neighboring cities, and they've pretty much said, you can't use our water anymore, and we don't have a connection to state water. But I want to explore some solutions, and one you mentioned earlier today I wasn't aware of, about you said the Basin 2 or 3 or something you were mentioning that they were going to start drilling for.
A mound well number 3.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So just getting more familiar with what resources we have and what we could do. And then the reason why I made my platform issues, revitalizing Johnson Corridor, all these on the east side, sidewalks in Montalvo, was because those seem to be the low-hanging fruit. Those seem to be the things that were already approved, that are kind of sitting there, that we can kind of try to push forward and continue in the momentum in the right direction, so that it can benefit our community. Outside of that, there's a lot of things that city needs. So when you want to talk about environmental justice, one of the first things I want to look into is, a lot of people don't realize MetroLink has a station right behind all the apartments at the end of the street. And what they do is they run their engines all night long, and all the exhaust from those engines, the residents breathe up, and a lot of the residents have upper respiratory issues as a result. I don't know if there's a direct correlation or not, but that's what I've been told. And they have actually approached council members who don't represent this area, but represent another area, and those cries have fallen on deaf ears. And so as a council member, being a representative of this district, that'll be one of the first things I look into. So that's an example of one. There's a lot of them. I want to, for the specific to the general plan, I want to make sure we protect inclusionary housing, and I want to make sure my time is up.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, same question. If elected, what would be your top priority?
All right. As I've stated in all my materials and all the forums that I've attended, number one thing after getting elected is to sit down with the city manager and the CFO and really find out exactly where we stand financially in the city. There have been a lot of things that kicked around, different numbers, both for our budget itself, but also where we stand financially. If you look at some of the projects that are out there, even the state water one the other day, we've heard numbers like 27, 34, $55 million. What is the actual number? What are the real costs of what we've got in our budget? And again, what is our financial future? Everything that we want to do, whether it's working on Johnson Drive or dealing with pension issues, everything comes down to how much money do we really have? Now, I've been working with an organization for about 13 years that I helped found called Venturans for Responsible and Efficient Government, VREG. We try to put out a newsletter that has information on all these issues of water and pensions and the city's finances. And a few years ago, even though we didn't necessarily agree with Rick Cole, he had his chief financial officer was Jay Panzica, and Rick actually met with us, I think, once, but Jay met with us 3 times to discuss the city's finances and the city's budget, and he was very open about what was going on and where we were at. Since then, the city managers that we've had, even though we've had some decent relationships with them, have become more and more guarded about what the numbers actually are. Now, I do know one thing that was recently said, it's particularly with the pensions, is that there is a possibility, and there is a very real possibility, because as we know, we've never fully recovered from the Great Recession, but if there is another recession, there's a very real possibility that this city could go bankrupt simply over the pension numbers. So I need to know what's going on, then I can plan accordingly, and we can prioritize and figure out what we can do and can't do in this community. So that's the number one thing. Where are we? And I want to be able to look all of you and all my friends and family in the eye and tell you exactly where we are once I find that out. So Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to start mixing it up, various topics. This question is a 1-minute question. So this one will start with Charlie, and it's for both of you. Do you accept campaign contributions from those who will have business before the council?
Right now, I'm taking money from people who do not have any business in front of the council. I don't know of any council members and anybody that I've worked with that have taken money from people that have a business that's directly going to be before the council. So it's really important that, every issue, every donation is about the idea that they support you and what you're doing, not that you support them and what they plan on doing in the community. So to me, it's just it's the only way to go. It's what you have to do.
Okay. Same question for you, Lori. Do you accept campaign contributions from those who will have business before the council?
I do not knowingly accept any contributions from any person who that would stand to directly benefit. What I will tell you is when you set up a website and it has a contribution button and you mail out envelopes, you don't necessarily know each and every donor. Most of the donors that I start out with are donors from my last campaign cycles, and they are people who are community leaders. They're people who have been activists, people who are concerned about the community, people from the social justice community, people from the union community, people from all over. So I couldn't say for sure if I know every single donor does that, but for the most part, I don't go into this trying to seek out donations from anybody who would financially benefit by any decision that I would make as a council member, because that definitely would be a conflict of interest. And I don't want to appear to be a candidate who's bought or sold by the highest bidder. That is definitely not who I am. And that is indicative of the issues and the values that I bring to the table.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next question, we'll start with Lori. This is a 3-minute question. It's regarding marijuana policy.
Mm-hmm.
The city so far has taken a cautious approach regarding marijuana policy. Currently, our understanding as a board is the city allows a limited number of companies to provide courier services to distribute medical marijuana to patients from dispensaries that are not located within the city of Ventura but are located within the county. The city does not permit dispensaries within city limits for either medical or recreational use. Do you support the status quo, meaning keep things as they are, or do you support changes, and if so, what would they be?
I am totally against the status quo. But I do understand why the city is cautious. And I appreciate their caution. That's what their role is. That's what they're supposed to do, have the best interests of the city and the safety at large. However, having said that, we may be missing an opportunity. And the reason why I say that is by only allowing 1 or 2 businesses in to deliver medical marijuana, that is creating a monopoly that does not allow for competition. And in a healthy economy, you have businesses that compete one another, that drives the prices down, that allows people to have choice, and it allows people to be able to spend more money. And when you spend more money, that's more sales tax revenues. More sales tax revenues means there's more money to fund city services, and that's what we want. And so we're missing an opportunity for economic development. In addition to there not being dispensaries locally, I mean, in our general plan that's coming up, we can call out. We can say if we allow a dispensary, we could say we only allow a dispensary in 2 areas of the city, and where they're at, they can only be zoned industrial or whatever we decide. And they can give very strict parameters. And then we can use other cities that have already done it as an example and move forward cautiously with all deliberate speed, but to the benefit of our city, because if the argument is it's a safety need, then all the revenues, I'm not going to say all of them, but a large percentage of those revenues could be used to hire more officers. It could be used to increase paid for overtime. It could be used to increase response times, to get more dispatchers in the police department. I mean, anything. And we can address those needs. So it's all about planning. It's all about getting input from community members like yourself to decide what is the best way to move forward, and where should it start, and how should it start, and what is it going to look like. And let us all be a part of the conversation. But just to remain stagnant and do nothing is not the right move for the city. It is not the right move. We're falling behind. And the reason why our water infrastructure is not in place, the reason why we have all these empty vacant lots inside the city, is because the city was anti-development. The city was NIMBY, not in my backyard. The city said no. The city said we don't want it, because they were responsible to the special interests that funded their campaigns and that put them in office. And those people said, we don't want that. But there's more than those people in the city now. We're not in an odd election cycle where only 20% of the voters come out. Now 85% of the voters come out in an even election cycle with special districts, and your voices will be heard. And I have heard that for the most part, it seems like most of the residents are for this, and I'm for it too.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Charlie, it was a long question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I have always been a proponent of legalized marijuana. I believe that we've wasted way too much money on our drug war, on that particular drug, when we could have helped our community a long time ago. And I know from my teenage days that it was not a drug that was for me, but not that I didn't try it, but it just wasn't for me. But I know plenty of other people who, just like I like to drink alcohol, they smoke marijuana or eat marijuana brownies or whatever. But really what it comes down to me in this city is that we have a measure that was passed by the California voters. It's the will of the people. And I think that it's only our responsibility as a government to make sure that this is implemented as a, as Lori said, as something where we get the ideas of what's worked and what hasn't worked from other communities. We move very slowly. We open up, 2 or 3 dispensaries scattered throughout the city, so there's not any fear, burden, or whatever on any particular community. Make sure that they're put in the proper shopping centers or whatever, that it's not next to a school or so on. But we need to have the will of the people served, first of all. I mean, we're shucking our responsibilities, I think, if we don't. And then we're pushing it off into other communities, which I think is ridiculous, too, both for the financial reasons as well as responsibility. But I really, look at this as a turning point, a tipping point in our American society. I mean, we know for a fact that we can't afford prescription drugs. We're being screwed by the pharmaceuticals is what's happening. You look at all the commercials that are on TV, it's all about pharmaceutical drugs. There are so many fewer side effects for the people who can handle marijuana than the side effects that you see on all these commercials for the poor people that have to take all these different Xanax and all the other drugs. Which really leads me to probably one of the biggest things. I'm a super Tom Petty fan. One of my best friends, Joe Bako, they died of opioid overdoses, mixing drugs. And this opioid epidemic is just out of control. And I think if people who need some sort of stress relief or physical, relief, if they smoke or take a little marijuana, I think that's 100% better than taking these opioids. So I would really like to see us have a great conversation about this. To me, there's no, part of this is all about communication. I would love to sit down with you guys and hear what your side of this and how you think about it. But I've talked to enough people and seen enough people that I definitely think that I would support us doing something in this community, whether it starts first with medical marijuana dispensaries or if we go right to recreational. Last little quick story, my wife's grandmother, when Laura was a teenager, grandmother lived with her off and on, and she would go out and pick some little herbs out of the backyard. Well, it turns out that grandma was picking some of the marijuana herbs out of the backyard, and she said that was the best tea that she ever made and felt really great. So,
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go to another subject. Charlie, you'll go first. This is a 2-minute question, and this is a question in regard to rent control. And this is for both of you. There is a statewide proposition on the ballot this November, Proposition 10, regarding rent control. Do you support Prop 10? Why or why not? And if Prop 10 does pass, would you support or oppose City of Ventura having a rent control ordinance?
a very good and very topical question. First of all, I want to state that I believe that home ownership is what I really want to push. I believe that that's where you get your community pride, your sense of community, and certainly helps people out with their taxes and everything else. So it really makes them a part of the community. Renting, particularly in this community, as expensive as it is, you would think that I would want to support rent control here. I don't think I want it here yet, but I do support Proposition 10. I've spent a lot of time, talked to a lot of people, been on the fence, gone back and forth. But the bottom line is I think that we need to have, every city should have the opportunity, if they want to pass a rent control, I think they should be able to. And I think that in our city, I would like to see that as a tool in the toolbox of things that we can use to work to control blight in neighborhoods where you've got basically slumlords or people that are just not keeping up their property and stuff that are using these properties as rentals. I mean, they need to be held responsible too, and I think that this is something that we hold over that. And again, if it meant that there are fewer rentals, fewer apartments being built, I don't know if that's such a bad thing, because like I said, I would prefer to see people being able to get into starter homes. I would love to see small communities built, and this goes for people who are in the who could afford a $300,000 to $350,000 mortgage. We're looking at like 8 to 10,000 square foot houses being built on, say, a half an acre or so with a rec room or a kitchen, a communal. There's a whole different style of living that is now very acceptable, and we need to bring some of that into our community and allow people to have their own home, their own starter home to get started. We can make it for Ventura residents. We can put restrictions on the resale and basically make sure that it allows people to get into the market, get onto the ladder so that they can get a foothold to move up. Thank you.
Okay, Laurie, let me go ahead. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, it's okay.
Go ahead.
So my parents still live in the house I grew up in up the street on Partridge, and they had the benefit of working their entire lives and retiring right before the economy crashed. I mean, like right that same year that the economy crashed, they like barely grabbed onto their retirement, and they were able to pay their home off, I think a year after that. And then because of Proposition 13, they were able to maintain their mortgage over these years that they were retired, because they're on a fixed income now. And so when we talk about Proposition 10, these are the things that I'm thinking about, right? When the woman came up to me crying and saying, can you do something about rent control? And when I ran in 2013, a lot of the major voters, those 20% of voters, were manufactured homeowners. And there's a lot of manufactured home parks in the city of Ventura. I don't believe there's one in District 6, because there's one right across the street which takes it right out of our district. But those manufactured home owners, most of them were seniors. There's a lot of those parks that were mandatorily only for seniors, no kids, no starter families, whatever. And there are already current rent control rules existing within those parks. But what they were saying, the seniors in the community, was that the laws were not being enforced. And this is part of the reason why Proposition 10 came up, is because you have laws that don't have any teeth and don't do anything for the people that actually need them on the ground. And when we talk about pensions in our city budgets, we're talking about possibly taking away the pension from people who are already seniors, that are already on a fixed income, that if they lose that money, they're going to be on the street, which contributes to our homeless issue even more. So you can't solve one problem by creating another one. And so I have to say that I'm leaning towards the support of Proposition 10. I'm still on the fence of whether or not it's the best thing for the city of Ventura, but I definitely support it for the state. But again, we have to have that conversation with community members like you. Maybe the need is not as big as we think it is, but maybe it actually is.
Okay, thank you. Our next question has to do with police, fire, and library services. And I do want to mention that within District 6, we have the new Hill Street Library. And so that's within our district. 2-minute question for both of you. Lori, you'll go first. What are your views regarding the current level of services for police, fire, and library services?
So my understanding for police and fire is that we have the fire station that is limited funded by a grant, and each time they have to get a new grant to continue building and continue funding the salaries of the firefighters. And I have to say, the city of Ventura has had a drought every 10 years. And every time we have a drought, we get these restrictions. And every time after a drought, we have a fire. And every time we have a fire, we have a flood. And that's how it works. It's consecutive. That's how it falls. And in the meantime, our previous city council members never did anything to plan for the next 10 years. And so I think it's important that for our fire department that we maintain that. For police, the police department has been understaffed for a very long time. They shared the burden of cutbacks or freezes on their pay during the recession. And we need to make sure that if our city is protected, that we have to invest, because we're one of the few cities who have a police department that is funded by the city and not contracted out to the sheriff's department. We don't want that, because those are not community police officers. And then as far as the library is concerned, I'm rushing because of the 2 minutes. I understand that the Hillmont Library is already outgrowing its location. And I think it's a wonderful idea. I think that's why I mentioned maybe having another pop-up library at the Kimball Park. But I remember as a child, we had the bookmobile that parked on Ralston once a week, and I learned my love of books that way. So libraries are extremely important to me, because I didn't have a lot of a social life in my pre-adolescent years, and so my social life, I lived vicariously through the books that I read. And by 13 or 14, I was reading 700-page books, and I think that was a foundation for me that I got for my learning and for going to college, and and my love of learning. I'm a perpetual learner. I'd still be in school now if I could be. So.
Okay, thank you. All right. And then Charlie, what are your views regarding the current level of services for police, fire, and library services? 2
Well,
minutes.
first of all, I would say that the police department and the people that I've talked to and the officers that I know, and my understanding of especially what we've seen nationwide, where there's certainly the police a lot of times are looked at as the bad guys, or that they don't have enough training, or that they're not sensitive enough. I think a lot of it comes from maybe some lack of training, but mostly I think from being overburdened. And I think in this case, in our city, the guys have said that they're working way too much overtime, and that they really do need a few more people out there. And I would support that, because I don't see overtime as a real benefit to the community if they're under that kind of a stress, where something could go wrong and we would all be held liable. And obviously we don't want to lose any lives or have anybody hurt and stuff. So I really think that needs to be looked at probably first. The fire department, I really want to talk more with the fire department about this, but with the technology and logistics that we have these days, the equipment that we have, I really think that we can be a better fleet. But I think we need to take full advantage of that. And I think there are some things that have been played out that where, for instance, the number of calls that are out there, the chief wasn't able to say what kind of calls those were. And if you're taking into account every single call that comes, the system is just going to get flooded. We need to basically make sure that it's true emergencies that the fire department is responding to. And lastly, as far as the libraries go, I really think that, Lori and I are in agreement here that, we grew up with Bookmobile, and I know my kids, just recently, my granddaughters would walk with my wife to the park to pick up a book over at Barranca Vista Park, and that was a great experience for them. They did that several times this summer. But I think ultimately what we need, if we don't have a Bookmobile, although I would certainly like to see that out there, I think that it's like an ice cream truck, it creates excitement. But we need to have several small libraries throughout East Ventura so that, again, seniors and kids and people can get to these libraries quickly, can exchange books, gives them a real opportunity to get out in the community. So I think if we had, 2 or 3 more little libraries scattered around the area, that would be sufficient.
Okay, thank you. Lori?
She already answered that.
Okay, very good. Sorry. We're going on. That was question 7. Okay, number 8. Thank you. This one's for Charlie. Kind of a long question, multiple part question. So the total time is 3 minutes. And if you need me to repeat any portion of these, let me know. This has to do with homelessness. Do you see a need for any additional facilities or services for the homeless? You can write these down too if that helps. If so, what types of facilities and/or services would you like to see? And where would you locate them in the city at large? Where would you locate them within District 6?
First of all, I have to state that I've been working on the homeless issue for about the last 3.5 years. Spent 3 of those years so working with the county's Continuum of Care, which is an organization that basically is put together to receive HUD funding. I was actually working with the Homeless Services and Housing Committee, and what we found was that, first of all, that the issues were finally coming to a head after years of just talking and talking. Now the counties and cities are actually finally doing something, and as you're probably well aware, we're on our way to having a 24-hour shelter at the Armory in Oxnard, which will be for 6 months, which will be kind of an experiment to see how we can all work together and work out some of the bugs. But ultimately, we're supposed to have a year-round shelter down on Knoll Drive here in Ventura. And what this means is that we've taken one pretty major step, but we haven't made the commitment yet to really do what I think we on this Housing and Services Committee know that needs to be the next step. Actually, there need to be 2 real big steps after that. But the first one after that is that if we get these folks in there and the idea is to have them under one roof. This is not a walk-in center. They're going to be there to receive the services that they need to get their lives back together, whether it's emotional support, whether it's has to do with drug and alcohol counseling, and receiving job training, retraining, and then ultimately getting a job. That's the goal of people being in there. Now, once they've gone through that program, and we're looking at about 60 to 75 people or so going through at a time. Once they've gone through, they have to have somewhere else to go. So if we don't have some temporary housing that'll give them, say, up to 1 year to really get themselves back into society, established, maintain the job that they have, then again, all the money that, you know, we put there to put this service out there, to have this shelter, will have gone to waste. And of course, it'll set them back even farther than they would have been before. So we need to go through that step next. And then, like I said, we need to really come up with what is our permanent housing. And, you know, there are a lot of great ideas out there. There's a developer who's done things all over the state, but is actually involved in Orange County now, who got people into apartments. This is all coming from private funding, and they would help pay for the apartment for the person, depending on how much money they could afford with the job that they had, for the first like 2 years. And what this would do is it would allow them to wean them off of it. As they got more money, as they stayed established in their job and stuff, they were able to eventually become the renter themselves. And I think that was a great program. But there's lots of stuff like that out there. And we need to just look at what's worked, what will work in this area. I would like to see lots of little establishments so that, you know, for housing, so that it's spread around the city.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that a little later.
Thank you. Lori, would you like me to repeat that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you see a need for any additional facilities or services for the homeless? If so, what types of facilities and or services would you like to see? And where would you locate them in the city at large? And where would you like to see them within District 6?
Okay, so when we talk about services specifically, one of the things we talked about recently at another forum was having, one of my ideas is having more additional pop-up cleanup centers for the homeless. Because one of the things I said back in 2013 was that the homeless issue is a public safety issue. Because the question was brought up about hygiene. And if you have homeless children and families and mothers on the street who are going to the same school with our children and go shopping at the same grocery stores and walking down the same streets, then if they're sick, then our children are sick. And so to have pop-up cleanup centers where they can wash their clothes, take a shower, get clean socks, get toothbrushes, I mean, basic thing, a bar of soap, just those basic things that homeless tend to need because they're on the street, sunblock, shampoo, those things are important. And one of the things that happened back in 2013 is we had a church that was attempting to service a large amount of homeless people in the whole entire city, all in one location in a residential community right next to an elementary school. And that wasn't the best. It wasn't the best fit, right? But they were providing a needed service. So my idea is to have multiple areas throughout the city that provide that service, not smack dab in the middle of a residential community next to an elementary school and a park, but close enough to the need, but just far enough away so that, and because there's multiple ones, you don't have a concentration of it. So you don't have people coming from the west side all the way over to Midtown, or all the people going from Midtown all the way to the east side to get one service. So those are my ideas. So I've volunteered before at some of the warming shelters in the winter, and it's really sad that one of the things they do say they need the most is socks. Because they're walking a lot, they're outdoors a lot, and everything gets soiled, and a lot of times they're soiled to such a degree that washing doesn't clean them. It just has to be thrown away and get new ones. And so that's pretty much the extent of my ideas as far as services are concerned. I know there's a lot of organizations like Turning Point, Salvation Army, the Rescue Mission that, you know, will serve food at certain days of the week, but I don't believe we have, well, that's another issue. I won't get into that right now. But I understand that the city already requires all the homeless to have some form of identification so that they can identify who they are and if they're from here. And that helps us understand where they've come from. And the services as they go into our housing shelters, I think there needs to be a structure and rules about who gets to get in there and how and why. And some of that's related to the fact that some homeless are chronic vagrants and some of them are families who fell on hard times and need to get assessed and get into a better situation. And so I think that we just need to have a very clear strategic plan about how we'll address those needs.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move, the next series of questions relate to development within the city of Ventura. Some of them relate to District 6, but we'll take it one at a time. This next question is a two-part question, so I'll have each of you spend 90 seconds on the first half of the question, and then we'll rotate again in the same order on the second part. So I'll make a statement that's, what are your views on the following statement? The city of Ventura should grow in ways that retain our quality of life. So there's the growth aspect and there's quality of life. So part A, 90 seconds for each of you. To what extent and at what rate should Ventura grow? This would be Lori.
So apparently in the city of Ventura, growth is a dirty word. And so first I'd like to say that when we talk about growth, we're talking about our children. We're talking about our college graduates. We're talking about business owners. We're talking about businesses who bring jobs into the community when we say growth. We're not talking about inviting people from areas that we find unfavorable into our city that we don't want here. And so when we talk about the natural growth, natural population cycled growth, it means that we need to make sure there's enough affordable housing for the people that live here, that grew up here, that are natives here. We need to make sure that they have jobs here. We need to make sure that we have a well-planned community, that the general plan is inclusive of all groups of people within the city of Ventura.
Okay, and Charlie, you have 90 seconds, same question.
Okay. The real tough thing about, again, how we've been dealing with growth for the last 25 years is, whether it's avoiding the water, resolving the water issue, or what kind of housing is appropriate for the area. We've done things in fits and starts, and I really think that that's problematic for where we're at right now. And the fact is that we really have gone from even NIMBYism to elitism as far as what we see as what's needed in the community. And I know that for District 6, and I know Lori feels the exact same way, that we really need to do things for Ventura residents, and that's where we haven't done it in a long time. If we want to be able to keep our seniors and our youth in this community, we need to build affordable, quality senior housing and starter homes for Ventura residents. And that's really where it starts. And if we can get those seniors to take the option to move into that kind of housing, then we will have created workforce housing, and we'll have a cycle going where people who are, two-income families, who've been working hard for several years, are now going to be able to buy a house in the $550,000 range. We haven't had that. What we've done in the past is we built giant, colossal things that look shiny on tiny little pieces of property and invite people from outside of the area to come in here. So, and that's created the NIMBYism. So, I really think we need to concentrate on building for what Ventura residents need.
Okay, we're going to keep the same order because this is a subpart of the same question. So, Lori, you go first, 90 seconds. How specifically would you see to it that then, while we're growing, how would you see to it that Ventura's quality of life is preserved? So we need growth. We need to preserve quality of life. How would you propose we do that?
So the quality of Venturans' life is directly related to our environment. So we have the hillside, we have the beach area, we have our downtown, we have our agricultural community, we have our college community, and we also have this new great health and wellness district. So we have all these different things that contribute to our economy and diversify our economic portfolio in the city. So with respect to our water issue, as we grow, in order to maintain our quality of life, we not only need to respect all those things that I just mentioned, but also the water resources. And so when we talk about development and growth and building, infill strategic net zero development is where it's at. And one of the other first things I'd like to do when I get in the office is to identify all the vacant buildings and lots in the inside of the city, not in the peripheral, not encroaching upon SOAR, permanent open spaces and buffers between other cities, but inside the city, like this Ventura County Star old building that they used to be in Ralston has been vacant for many number of years. But identifying a lot of places like that so that in the future, as we move forward to build, as we identify developers who fit within the city's needs, we can say, we can direct them, and we can say, we have this lot, we already identified that this would be a good location to build, 20 units, and this would be a good location to build a commercial, a choice housing area, or tiered, or a combination with the park, anything, but we are the ones leading it and directing it.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, how specifically would you see to it while we grow, how would you see to it that Venturans' quality of life is preserved?
Well, again, first of all, it depends on who you talk to and where they live. So I'm going to talk very specifically about our District 6. And while it is somewhat varied, most of the housing here is over 35 years old. Most of the people that live here, certainly a lot of the voters are seniors. And like I said before, we really, to develop here, we need to do these starter homes and get a cycle going where Ventura residents can actually stay in Ventura. And I think that, one, that would cut down on traffic, which would benefit all of us in our quality of life. I think, two, it would keep families closer together. That's a great thing for our quality of life here. It would have, especially if we're not building, we're going to need to build some up, we're going to need to build some out. But the bottom line is that if we are thoughtful, and again, back to my other thing that I do, public relations, I really think that if a developer or somebody wants to come do something here, they need to meet with the cities and the residents first. They almost never do that. That's part of the problem, and then people are up against them immediately. If you've got somebody who wants to do something in our community, I want to make sure that I know what's going on, and I want to make sure that our groups, I think I said this last time, are very well involved, and I think that that's great, and one of the reasons why we need a community council. But that's how we can work together to make sure that we get projects that we really want in this community. But if we're not growing, believe me, we're dying. So we have to do some things that are going to create something, and that's what I would like to see.
Okay, thank you. All right, the next two questions have to do, again, with development. And Charlie, you'll go first. We'll take this in 60-second chunks. If you need an additional 30 seconds, just let me know, okay? We'll take it one question at a time. So this has 3 subparts. I'll ask the first part. What do you envision specifically for the Victoria corridor? So in terms of housing, business, commercial, what do you envision? 60 seconds.
All that 60 seconds, huh? Well, I got to tell you, Mark, and the rest of you, my concentration is and will be on what we do on Johnson Drive first, because it's already blighted and it can only get worse, and I've talked to people, and you know how long everything takes as planned. So the sooner we can find somebody who's willing to invest in our community, come up with a development plan for that area so that we can fix Johnson Drive, so that we actually can get traffic in and out of here, on a daily basis as well as in emergency situations, and have something that truly is a gateway to the community. That's what's important. Victoria is something that we're going to need. I hated the fact that they tried to kind of quickly push through an idea of what they thought Johnson or Victoria should look like. I wasn't aware of what they were planning until they already basically had a plan. So the bottom line is that we need to work together on coming up with a plan that works for us, not just for the people who have some great ideas.
Okay, and just to let you both know, we will get to Johnson Drive corridor, but same question for Lori. What do you envision for the Victoria corridor?
So for the Victoria corridor, I'd like to see a few traffic mitigation studies to for more impact, because as you know, we are having the drive-through Starbucks that's coming in, and we got the new apartment building behind us. It's not directly on Victoria, but all the people who live there will be coming out of that, going directly onto Victoria Avenue. We have an opportunity to, there's really, the way I see as Victoria is that it's really built out. There's really not a lot. So when I was younger, just to give a little background, there was a auto center right where Chipotle and all those nice restaurants that they put in there. And, you know, back in the day, auto centers brought cities in a lot of money, and so they really got to put them anywhere. But I'd just like to see a more community feel for the Victoria Avenue, because it's very, it feels almost like a highway.
Okay.
So.
All right, the second part of the question, we'll keep it in the same order. So Charlie, what do you envision for the Johnson Drive corridor specifically?
Well, like I said before, I'm not going to pay any attention to Johnson Drive. I'm going to concentrate on Victoria. No, no, I really, you guys, when I first moved out here in 1986, and I saw that they were going to, shortly thereafter, they started building things on Johnson. I thought, that's, you know, great. We're going to have something good, something local that, you know, we can go to, and some restaurants and stuff, a movie theater. And it never looked like it got completed. It looked like a joke. It looked like a carnival, and now it's a blighted, junky looking carnival. I would really like to see the whole thing raised. I would like to see us help the businesses that, like Cronies, that have been successful there, to stay in business in that location as long as possible, but eventually relocate to something near that in a brand new building that'll have some commercial, some retail, some housing. And I really think that it needs to be that whole corner there, that, you know, we can certainly go up higher there. It's not going to be in anybody's it'll look nice. It's not going to be anybody's backyard or anything like that. So I think that that's really what we need to focus on there.
Okay, thank you. The last and third part of this question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lori. Sorry about that.
So, as I said from the very beginning, that one of my main focuses will be revitalizing the Johnson corridor. So, just to give you a little background, I have 6 years experience working in project management and redevelopment. What that means is that blighted areas were our specialty. So we were supposed to, what we did was create special districts, go in and say, we're going to improve this area, we're going to tear it down, build it back up, increase the property values, and thus invite new business, thus increase sales, increase the sales tax revenues, and have more money to fund city services. That is the plan. That is the idea. That's the whole point of revitalization. And so in that, again, Taco Bell just already rebuilt. There's a school, and even when it was first built, it was built terribly wrong. But we don't want to get rid of Just Barbecue or Cronies or the Jump House. We can relocate them. We can build housing. We can have a better plaza area.
Okay, thank you. Third and final area within the district, specifically This has to do with the industrial area along Ventura Boulevard, which is the frontage road just north of the 101 freeway. And so the area between Grand Avenue and Johnson Drive along that corridor. Let's see, what do you envision for the industrial area along Ventura Boulevard? And we'll keep it in the same order, Charlie.
You know, first of all, this is an area, and I worked with the Oxnard Chamber of Commerce as a business advocate for 2 years, dealt with a lot of issues like this. I mean, obviously, one of the issues that we had a problem with was it's very hard to find the actual property owners and get them to communicate with you. The businesses that are there are mostly just, you know, leasing, and they're there as long as their lease is. So they're not really interested in improving the property. So it's very important to find out who the property owners are and start to work with them on, you know, what they would like to see in that area. It's not up to us to decide they own that property. But there are other things that we could do, and back to my community pride thing, I mean, you know, that's a great area where we could, you know, every couple times a year go through there and do some work on some landscaping and do some litter pickup. I mean, it is certainly an area that, again, it looks, it contributes to the picture of blight in the Montalvo area. So it's something that I think we, now that we have districts, can concentrate on more, the things that just have been neglected for a long time, and we need to work together with you to address that.
Okay, thank you. All right. This next. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Lori, go ahead. Very sorry.
So first, I'd say it goes back to the general plan. So because Montalvo's a recently annexed area, you know, it's industrial, a lot of that area, and it's been ignored for a lot of years. And it's been a place for truckers and the lemon distribution business, and there's like a moving business and a lot of a liquor store and car repair, auto repair. So we really haven't focused on it that much. But with the general plan, we have an opportunity to address zoning and have some designing elements for the area where we could say, hey, we'd like to see this improved, and this is how we'd like to see it done. So that's how I would approach the whole situation. One idea would be, because I really am a proponent for the pop-up cleanup areas and having places for homeless, I think in some parts of the industrial area, Montalvo might be a good location to have one of those pop-up locations. And we can also, in the same way that the auto center was able to revitalize and make it look better, we could make those auto centers and the side of the railroad and the side of the freeway look a lot better over there in that area.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, our next question will go to Lori first. 2 minutes for each of you. In what specific ways, if any, would you try to protect existing neighborhoods that are in or near targeted growth areas such as the Victoria Corridor and the Johnson Drive Corridor? Would you support height limits? And if so, what heights would you see as being appropriate? Would you support density limits, setbacks, step backs? So, what would you do to protect existing neighborhoods? So if we're going to be targeting growth on the corridors, Victoria Corridor and Johnson Drive, what steps would you take to try to protect existing neighborhoods in relationship to those developments?
Yeah, so I heard a lot of current council members or current candidates running for city council say in the last couple forums that they really want to focus on density in all of our corridors. And that's kind of code word for, you know, we have our eye on Victoria Avenue. And so I definitely support setbacks, because I don't want to see, although I think it was a better use to have Chipotle in all those places where the auto center is, but it was built right on the edge of the sidewalk. And that was one of the things when that was built, I thought, oh, it's a good idea they built it, but why did they build it that way, you know? And so I don't where the residential homes are right when you get off the freeway and come up Victoria, and there's about, I'd say about 10 homes on the right side. It was necessary to have that very large setback, and that protects the homeowners, and it makes it safer for the community. I definitely would be for having density restrictions or requirements and height requirements. So I believe it would be different for each area. I don't think that we can go in and say, in this whole entire area, nothing can be built over 2 stories, and everything has to be under 100 units anytime it's ever built. I think it should be on a case-by-case basis, and I think it should take in consideration the surrounding buildings, if there's any historical buildings, or if there's anything, elements within the community that are worth preserving, that those things should be taken in consideration with that. Was there a second part to the question?
Okay. It had to do with, would you support height limits? If so, what height limits would you see as appropriate? Would you support density limits? What about building setbacks and step backs?
Okay, so the height limit. So perfect example, I'll just use that apartment building as an example. If I was sitting on the council member, I would have said, because that project, I did do my research. They did go by exactly what was in the general plan. Unfortunately, Rick Cole had written in the general plan at that time, before Montalvo was annexed, that it was okay to have this level of density on this side of town. So when the developers came in and proposed that project, it just went straight through because they did everything that they were allowed to. But when it came to the city council's desk and they were allowed to rule on it, they could have said, although we're not going to stop it from being done, instead of it being 3 stories, why don't you do 2? And then, and if 2 is too much, let's do
Okay.
1. And if 100 units is too much, let's
All
cut
right.
it down to 70 or something.
Okay, thank you. Charlie?
All right. Again, now that we have districts, I think we can focus on this a lot more. We do share Victoria with, I believe it's District 2. So we need to have real conversations about what we as a community want to have there. And I think we're going to have a lot more input, and our input will be a lot more valued. Another thing that I really, when you look at setbacks, height limits, density, a lot of this looks really good on paper from the planners and the people that are designing these things. I found, again, when you actually get people who are in those positions to make not only the decisions to support things, but to draft these zoning and these codes and everything, they need to actually get out and walk the streets and really see what they're talking about and looking at, because not everything fits in every situation. So, and one of the things I would like to see actually in zoning is that there is some flexibility, but that just means that that's going to give us an opportunity to also address what they want to put in there. The uniformity, the city is not uniform. It's one of the things, actually talking to some of the architects and other elected officials here, that actually is what makes Ventura unique. We don't really have a very specific design that we stick to. And if anything, we would like to see a little bit more specifics put out there. I would like to see, and some of the other people that I've talked to that are either on council or running for council, so that when somebody does come to the community, they have a better idea of what exactly we're looking for, that they're not just, shooting in the dark. So it's people try to make things too simple. It's not that simple. And because they try to make it simple, it makes things very difficult to do business, very difficult to understand what exactly is going on sometimes in your community, particularly with these apartments that were built. So it's about communication and staying informed and being able to listen and work with people who are, doing the design and people who are in the community.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead with the questions from the audience now. Some of them have already been.
Mark, can I take a 5-minute break here?
Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see. All right, how would you provide for solid water recycling? Okay, let me look at some of these questions here. I'm just going to mention them out loud. I'm not going to actually ask you the question because I just wanted to point out that we've answered some of these questions. One was a lot has been mentioned about Johnson Drive corridor, not much about Victoria corridor. Are you aware of the general plan and how it affects the local area of Montalvo's? What are your thoughts? I think you guys have answered that question. Another question, zoning and high-density building near residential neighborhoods. What do you see happening on Ventura Road between Johnson and Victoria and lower portion of Grand Avenue? Will you protect us from overbuilding? We sort of mostly covered that, not entirely. There was one question here that I'm not going to ask. It was, which political party do you feel most connected to or a member of? This is a nonpartisan race. If you want to ask the candidates personally, you can do that, but I'm not going to ask that question. Let's see. Okay. All right. What I'm going to ask one more question. Let Lori have a chance at it, and then we'll get to go to closing statements. So, Lori, I'm going to start you on this question first, and if Charlie has time to make it back, great. How do you feel about additional housing development, and where do you anticipate us getting the water from?
So that's kind of a two-part question. So the state just recently mandated that, see, in the past, we had the Ventura County, well, we still have the Ventura County Council of Governments. So there's one member from each council in all the 10 cities in the county, and they get together, and they were able to, in the past, to decide between the group of them where the affordable housing for the county as a whole would all be built. And in the past, they all agreed it would be built in Oxnard. And that's the reason why a lot of our workers and their population is 300,000, which is more than any other city in the county. But what the state has said is no more. Each city is responsible for building all of its own affordable housing, and you cannot just say, my neighbor's going to take care of that problem for me. I don't want to deal with it. And so we have to be mindful of the fact that we have that mandate. So we do have to build the affordable housing. Now, how do we do it in a way that respects our water resources, our limited water resources? That's why they identified net zero development. Net zero development means that when you identify buildings that have already been built, that already have an impact, a water impact on the city, that those projections 5 or 10 years out from today, that those projections have already been accounted for. So it's not an additional water burden on our water resources. It is utilizing resources that have already been accounted for. And that's why we like to focus on strategic infill, means inside the city. It means strategic means we're identifying those properties that would be a best use and best fit. Net zero meaning a low zero impact on our water resources. And so I 100% support that effort and that strategy.
Okay, I'll go ahead and repeat the question, Charlie. How do you feel about additional housing development, and where do you anticipate getting the water from?
Well, first of all, the water is actually already being used. We've got 2 or 3 generations of adults and probably some kids thrown in there living in a lot of the houses in our community. We've got houses that are being rented with 6 to 10 renters in them. If we can build some housing that's got more efficient everything, water, electricity, and so on, we'll actually be benefiting, our carbon footprint or whatever you want to call it. But bottom line is that the water is being used. People are here. If we build housing that's for Ventura residents to move into, then you're not changing anything. You're just, again, being more efficient. And as far as where to build, we really do need to go around and identify. We've got properties where we've got still have old farmhouses that are on a half an acre. It's strewn throughout East Ventura County. East Ventura. We've got a couple of lots that are used for commercial or retail right now that I think we could tear down and put something in there, maybe back to mixed use, have some housing above, build a 3-story building with some housing and some commercial and retail underneath. We need to just look at flexible opportunity. The plan that we've had has gotten it to this point. We really haven't done much as far as being creative, I don't think, for at least the last 10, 15 years. And there are so many great examples of creativity out there in the United States and even here in Southern California that we just need to look at, what would work here, and again, work with the community to make sure that it fits. And we're going to have to build. We're going to have someplace for our kids to live, and we need to have balance. Is what we need to have. We can't have this just be one giant retirement community. This has to have balance. So that's what we're striving for. That's what I'm striving for.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to ask this question, but there were some other good questions about traffic. What's the plan for left turn signal lights at Moon Drive and Ralston Street, turning left onto Victoria Avenue, street repair, potholes? What's the speed limit plan for Johnson corridor through the housing tract from Ralston Street up to Bristol Road? Cars are being parked on fronted lawns, no sidewalks in this neighborhood. I think that's the gist of it, but we don't have time to answer that, but just wanted you to be aware that was a concern. There was another question that had to do with how would you provide for solar and water recycling on all new construction and present location upgrades. Unfortunately, we don't have time, but I wanted you to be aware of those concerns as well. Due to time, let's go ahead and move to closing arguments. Let's see, or statements, I should say. Lori, you started first and Charlie went. So Charlie, why don't you start out and we'll let Lori have the last word. You'll now have 3 minutes to make your closing statement.
All right, great. I want to share a little bit about myself now that, I haven't spent much time and the questions really haven't been asked. A lot of the candidates like to talk about how much time they've either lived here or whether they're native. I've lived here for 32 years. I've raised my kids. They all went to the local schools and graduated, and the local colleges graduated. And now I've got grandkids that are 8, 9, and 17. My oldest grandson's a senior at Ventura High. And what I really want to do, and what I've seen through the eyes of my kids, my grandkids, but mostly through my friends and just conversations in general, is that, most of the kids that I coached soccer with, they all had to move out of this area. If you stay in this area, you really have to either be very fortunate and have parents that can afford to, put a down payment on a house for you, or you are going to be struggling. And what we really need in this community, like I said, is a balance so that our kids and people have an option. It just should be an option. It's not like, we're going to build for everybody, or this is something that, everybody can have. But again, back to what I feel like we're suffering from in this elitist attitude is that, when Eric Nazarenko talked about it the other night, he was proud to say that there were 24 units that were built for some low-income housing on the farm, but the rest of the units all start out there at $650,000. That's for a condo. That, to me, says nothing about Ventura. I really think that we need to look at what our roots are, what will keep our community, this sense of community that we want, what we can do to build the sense of community, is going to be very, very important in this election. You're going to have new people. It's going to take a little bit of a learning curve. Again, I think Lori is an exceptional person, but I think that I have more experience in leadership positions and working with other leaders in the community to really get things going faster, but there's still going to be a learning curve, and especially if we have several new candidates. So we have a new city manager. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of great opportunity here, and that's one of the things I talk about is the opportunity for East Ventura, but we have to grasp that. We have to know where we want to go, and we have to grasp that. And that's where I think I'm just happy to say that when I'm out precinct walking, people, for one, are excited that somebody is actually finally knocking on their door after all these years because we've been so ignored. And two, that they're very receptive to what I'm talking about. We need responsible government. We need economic vitality. And we need to make sure that we, particularly here in our precinct, in our district, are getting our fair share of the tax dollars, that the streets are taken care of, that the other parts of infrastructure are taken care of. But ultimately, as I've said, it comes down to our city's finances. And I want to really leave you with that, you know, we can talk about all the great things that we want to do, but if we don't have the money to do it, we're going to be stuck. And again, being stuck means sliding backwards. So whatever I do, whatever I think of, I want to think of how is this benefiting us? How is it bringing us new business and creating new jobs? That's what's important to me. And I hope that that's important to you so that we can do these other things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Lori, your 3-minute closing statement.
Yes, again, my name is Lori Brown. I'm running for Ventura City Council District 6. And I want to share with you that I stood with Ventura Unified School District parents against racial injustice. I marched with parents and community leaders like MyCop and CAUSE and a lot of different organizations against the incarceration of children. I stood up for districts for the city of Ventura as a spokesperson with CAUSE because I believed that each part of the city deserved direct representation. I sat on the board of CAUSE and voted for us to have a 501c4, which allows an organization to support candidates for office. Why? Because the values that a lot of people in the community of Ventura have were not heard. There were a lot of underrepresented, underhoused, and underemployed people in the city of Ventura, and I chose to be that voice. In 2013, when I developed my campaign platform, everybody said, don't talk about homelessness, don't talk about housing, don't talk about any of the poor people, don't talk about anything that's related to the struggling communities within the city of Ventura. I gave voice to women. I gave voice to Latinos. Those were my voter base. And I wanted to take my experience working in city government, managing expenditure accounts, contracting with contractors, working with developers for the benefit of the city of Ventura, understanding that when Proposition 13 was enacted, the cities and all around the country lost the funding mechanism for city services. Redevelopment came to fill in the gap. When redevelopment ended, Governor Brown used that money to balance the state budget on the city's backs and left cities holding the bag. That's why our current city council members pushed Measure O. Measure O put us in the black, but we're not going to be in the black forever. But what we need to focus on is increasing revenues, and that's what economic development is about. And I respectfully disagree, of course, that just because I'm younger and just because I might be a woman and a person of color, that doesn't make me, I'm not saying that's exactly what he said, but that is a perception that I'm not qualified. I am overqualified. And I'm here to tell you today that as your city council member, I will do what's in the best interest of the city of Ventura with your input and what's in the best interest of the district needs and the city as a whole. In addition to that, you want a city council member as somebody who cares about your children, the future of your children, like I was saying earlier, as a certified substitute teacher, as someone who raised their 3 children here in this community going, I went to Portola, my boys went to Montalvo, we all graduated from Buena High School. I have my youngest going to Ventura College as well, I graduated from there. But what I want to leave you with is that the city of Ventura, again, is a beautiful place. And as your elected official, I want to help make it gorgeous by starting with the general plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you both. Well, that concludes our candidate forum. I just want to mention that this candidate forum has been taped by CAPS TV, and we want to thank CAPS TV for doing that. I want to give you the blog post, the website where you can see this rebroadcast and get the word out to your friends. We had a candidate forum last Tuesday night, a week and a half ago, and this was the second of 2 candidate forums between Lori Brown and Charles Kistner Jr. for Montalvo District 6. We thank you for being here, and I would like to give, before we leave, let's give both of these candidates a round of applause. Thank you so much, and have a good day.